Now looking at the currency market with Nomvuyo Guma. She's macroeconomic strategist at Standard Bank here in Johannesburg. Nomvuyo, I know this is a perilous job, but I must ask for your range for the rand today. What do you think it will trade at?
Morning, Godfrey. Our range for the rand today, we've seen the rand start off a touch weaker this morning. Of course, we've all seen commodity prices down and Asian markets in the red, and that would suggest that there was a very risk-off sentiment still prevalent in the market this morning. And with all those factors stacked against the rand, we think that the rand still has a weakening bias today. So if rand bears can sustain a breach of the 8 rand level today, then we'd expect the rand to go possibly as far as 8.19.
So let's talk about the factors that are likely to push the rand past that 8 level in your view. We had credit numbers coming out this morning. We're seeing private credit extension up 6.06%, and that's against the Reuters consensus forecast of 5.46%. Where did Standard Bank stand in relation to that?
We were pretty much in line with consensus as well, Godfrey. So the numbers certainly surprised us to the upside as well. We saw some very robust growth coming through, but it mainly seems to have been from the category known as other loans and advances, and this is generally used as a proxy for corporate credit demand. So if you look at the household sector, mortgage advances, installment sales, all of those credit aggregates actually slowed, and total credit advance to households also slowed. And that's pretty much in line with the soft consumer spending that we're seeing. If you also look at retail sales, it seems to underpin or confirm that trend in softening consumer consumption. But on the corporate side, as I said, growth in that category accelerated about 13% year on year, and that was surprisingly robust. Does not entirely seem to tie in with the economic picture that we see unfolding of softer growth, which we expect to continue into the second half. In fact, Standard Bank has downgraded its growth outlook for this year. We see growth coming in just above 3%, and that's a substantial downward revision on our initial projection. So that corporate credit spend number there was surprisingly robust, and there are questions, of course, over how sustainable that growth is in light of the other deteriorating economic indicators.
Absolutely. Nomvuyo, I've got Warren Dick here from Investors Monthly. He's got a question for you. Warren.
Yes, hi, morning, Nomvuyo. I just wanted to ask you,
to
what degree do you think the depreciation of the rand now is going to restrict Governor Marcus's ability to cut interest rates going forward?
That's a very interesting question, of course, one that's quite topical at the moment. Obviously, we'll have to continue to look at the inflation numbers, and to that extent, we also have PPI numbers out today. If we see inflation accelerating quite sharply higher, of course, it's going to put the Reserve Bank in a difficult position as far as interest rates are concerned. But having said that, should we see a significant deterioration in the economy or the economic data that we're seeing, I think the Reserve Bank would be happy to cut rates in that situation and let inflation perhaps temporarily drift higher. But of course, a lot is going to have to depend on how far inflation runs up and how bad the growth outlook begins to look from here on out.
Yeah. Now, Nomvuyo, yesterday we had Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan as well as the Central Bank Governor Jill Marcus both speaking, and I want to quote them here. The minister said, "We are watching carefully and scratching our heads about what to do next." He was talking about the rand, and the governor herself was talking about watching Europe carefully for a, if you like, Lehman type event. But both those comments appear not to have moved the market at all. Why is that?
Godfrey, I think a large part of the reason is really that the markets are already quite volatile at the moment, and neither the finance minister nor Jill Marcus was really saying something that they haven't said already. We already know that the rand is quite volatile, and we do know that that's largely a function of the uncertainty that we see unfolding over the situation in Europe. Everyone is particularly worried at this point that if that situation isn't sorted out in the short term, then we could be heading potentially for another recession, and the data does seem to indicate that there is general economic slowness in most of the world's developed regions. So I think everybody is still focused on the European situation, and of course we have that vote out of Germany today whether they will ratify an increase in the size of the European Stability Fund. So I think that's the main key event, and I think that's why everyone is kind of held off from reacting to other comments while we wait to see how this German vote pans out today.
Absolutely. In fact, when we began our conversation with Warren, the one thing that he did say right at the start was that there's one event in town today, and that's the German parliament vote. Where do you see that going, and what kind of an impact do you see that having on the euro and on the rand?
Well, the expectations at this point are, of course, for the Parliament to ratify the increase in size. Should that not occur, that would be a huge risk event for the Rand. We'd, of course, expect to see risk aversion probably spike at that point, and the Rand could weaken perhaps even far further than we had initially projected in the trading range that I gave you today. So that remains the main risk event, but that certainly isn't our base case scenario.
Absolutely, 7.86. That's the way the Rand is trading at the moment. Nomvuyo Guma, macroeconomic strategist at Standard Bank. Thanks for joining us this morning.